My grandson tried to sell both my grave and my wife's grave, the one she's already buried in. And his parents helped him do it. That was the day I decided to make sure they'd never inherit even a single flower from that cemetery. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. I'm 77 years old, a widower, and a grandfather. For most of my life, I thought I had a family that understood the meaning of loyalty. I fought in Vietnam, came back with scars that still ache when the rain falls, and worked 40 years in construction until my hands grew too stiff to hold a hammer. I built houses for strangers, bridges for cities, and a future for my children. But the thing I'm proudest of wasn't built from wood or steel. It was my marriage. My wife, Margaret, and I had 51 years together before cancer took her. We buried her beneath the oak tree at Fairlawn Cemetery, the same cemetery where my parents rest, the one where I reserved the lot beside her years ago so we'd never have to be apart. I carved her headstone myself, letter by letter, until my hands bled from the chisel. People told me to hire someone, but I couldn't. That was my last gift to her, every stroke of her name, cut deep by the same hands that once slipped a ring on her finger. For months after she passed, I visited every morning. I'd bring her coffee in one of her old mugs, set it on the grass, and talk to her about my day. People thought I was crazy, but it was the only way I knew how to survive. That grave is more than stone and dirt. It's the last piece of her. It's sacred. So when my own daughter and grandson walked into my house with the idea of selling both her grave and mine, as if they were bargaining chips in some real estate deal, well, that's when I realized just how rotten blood can turn when poisoned by greed. After Margaret passed, I thought my children would close ranks around me. For a while, they did. Laura, my eldest, checked in often. She brought casseroles, fussed about the dust in the living room, and told me I needed more light in my life. Her son Alex, my only grandson, used to tag along, sitting in my workshop and asking about the tools, pretending he wanted to learn. But over time, the visits thinned. Phone calls turned shorter. Conversations changed. They stopped asking how I was. Instead, they asked what I was doing with the house, the pension, the land. One afternoon, Laura walked through my kitchen like it was a showroom, running her fingers along the countertops Margaret and I picked out 30 years ago. "Granite's still nice," she said absently. "But the layout is so dated. Open concept is what sells now." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She didn't laugh back. Alex grew bolder, too. At Christmas, when I poured him a glass of eggnog, he tapped the rim of the glass and said, "Guess I'll inherit this recipe, huh?" He was smirking, but something about the way his eyes slid toward Laura made the hair on my neck rise. I told myself I was imagining things. That grief was making me suspicious. But then came the Tuesday morning knock. Laura stood on my porch, folder tucked under her arm. Alex leaned against the railing, scrolling his phone like he was bored to be there. "Dad," Laura began, voice syrupy, "we've been thinking about how to help you. You've been carrying a lot since Mom passed. It's not good for you." I let them in, poured coffee, tried to pretend this was just another family talk. Laura opened the folder. I saw typed pages, highlighted clauses, legal signatures waiting to be filled. "It's about the cemetery lots," she said gently, as if announcing the weather. "You don't need both." My throat tightened. "Both?" She cleared her throat. "Mom's grave, and the one next to her. They're valuable, Dad. Prime location. Shade from the oak. Close to the path. We already spoke to the cemetery office. They said the plots could fetch a good price. The room tilted. My hands clenched around the coffee mug. You want to sell your mother's grave? Alex didn't even look up from his phone. It's not like Grandma's going anywhere. They can just move her. Happens all the time. And yours too, eventually. Think of the money, Grandpa. We could all benefit. Move her. They wanted to dig up the woman I buried with my own hands. The woman whose headstone I carved until my palms blistered. Laura reached across the table, her manicured nails grazing my skin. Dad, it's practical. You don't visit as much as you used to. And you're still alive, you could use the money for something fun. A cruise, maybe. Don't you want to enjoy yourself? My chest felt hollow, like all the air had been pulled from it. They weren't just trying to steal dirt and stone. They were trying to erase Margaret. To erase us. I didn't scream. I didn't throw them out. I just stared at them and felt something inside me break, not like glass, but like bone. Painful, slow, permanent. I set my mug down carefully, though my hand shook so badly the spoon rattled against the porcelain. I hear you, I said slowly. My voice didn't sound like mine, it was flatter, thinner. But this is a lot. I'll need time to think. Laura smiled like a banker closing a loan. Of course, Dad. We knew you'd be reasonable. Just look over the papers. No rush. Alex finally looked up from his phone long enough to smirk. Don't overthink it, Grandpa. It's just a patch of dirt. I forced a nod. I'll think. When they left, I stood at the window watching their car back out of the driveway. Laura was talking animatedly, hands moving like she was already spending the money. Alex was laughing. As their taillights disappeared, the silence in the house roared. That night was the heaviest of my life since Margaret's funeral. I sat at the kitchen table with her photo propped against the salt shaker. It was the picture from our 40th anniversary, her smile soft, her hand resting on mine. I whispered to her like I used to at the grave. They want to move you, I said. Dig you up. Sell the earth you rest in. The words strangled in my throat. I pressed my forehead to the table, shaking like a child. Every memory of her came crashing back, the day she picked the cemetery lot because she liked the oak tree, the way she whispered, I'll wait for you here, when the illness had her bedridden, the solemn day we lowered her down as I clutched the folded flag from my service. That lot wasn't dirt. It wasn't money. It was a covenant. And my own blood had tried to auction it off. By midnight, I found myself out in the shed, holding the chisel I'd used to carve her stone. My hands traced its worn handle. My palms still remembered the blisters. Don't worry, Margaret, I murmured. They'll never touch you. Never. I didn't know exactly how yet, but by the time the clock struck 2, I wasn't thinking about grief anymore. I was thinking about plans. The papers Laura left sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Every time I walked by, my chest tightened, as if the ink on those contracts was leaching poison into the air. I didn't need to read them. I already knew what they said. Sign here. Surrender here. Disappear here. But I also knew something they didn't. For 20 years I had served on the cemetery's board of trustees. I'd spent more evenings than I could count in that cramped back office, poring over bylaws, approving maintenance budgets, reviewing burial contracts. I knew every clause, every loophole. The law was a hammer. But I wasn't ready to swing it just yet. That night, I sat in my workshop, staring at Margaret's old gardening gloves still folded neatly on the shelf. She used to say the oak tree by her grave looked like it was holding the sky together. She wanted her final rest beneath its branches, where she could hear the wind through the leaves. I thought about Alex calling it just a patch of dirt. No. That ground was a cathedral, every root and stone consecrated by her laughter, her tears, and the vows we lived by. I ran my hand over the grain of the oak workbench I built 30 years ago. My palms, scarred and crooked now, still remembered how to shape wood, to carve, to create. And that's when I understood, my revenge couldn't just be legal. It had to be symbolic. It had to remind them, and everyone, that Margaret and I could never be uprooted like weeds in a garden. So I started planning. Not in the way Laura expected, with pens and signatures, but with silence. With patience. With the calm of a man who knows he doesn't have to shout to win. I gathered the old deed to the plot, the Veterans Memorial paperwork I'd filed years ago, and the bylaws tucked away in a battered file box. I didn't touch them yet. I just laid them out, like a soldier laying out weapons before a campaign. And then I whispered to her picture on the workbench. They think they can sell you, Maggie. Sell me. But when I'm done, they'll wish they'd never stepped foot in that cemetery. 2 days later, they came back. Laura didn't even knock this time, she walked right in with Alex trailing behind her, still glued to his phone. The folder was under her arm again, thicker now with more papers. Dad, she said brightly, did you think about what we talked about? I kept my face neutral, my voice soft. I did. Alex finally looked up, his grin smug. Told you he'd see reason. Laura placed the folder on the table, sliding it toward me like a dealer pushing chips across a casino felt. All you need to do is sign, Dad. We'll handle everything else. It'll be quick, painless. I reached out, laid my hand on the folder, but didn't open it. Instead, I looked at them, my daughter, my grandson, and forced a weary smile. You're right, I said, my tone quiet, almost defeated. It doesn't make sense for me to hold on to it forever. I suppose it's practical. Laura exhaled in relief, her shoulders dropping as if she'd been carrying the weight of my resistance for too long. Alex smirked, rocking back on his heels like a kid who'd just won a bet. Good, Grandpa, he said. Knew you'd get it. I mean, it's just a plot of land. You don't need it. Inside, the words slashed me raw. Just a plot of land. Just his grandmother's grave. Just my promise to her. But I nodded anyway, playing the role of the beaten old man. I'll sign, I murmured. But not today. I want to. I want to visit Margaret one more time before I do. Laura's eyes softened, mistaking my performance for sentimentality. Of course, Dad. Take your time. We'll come back Friday. When they left, Alex's fist bumped the air, and Laura kissed my cheek, whispering, You'll see, Dad. This is for the best. The door closed behind them. I stood there in the quiet, my hand still on the folder, until my lips curled into something halfway between a smile and a snarl. Because while they believed I was dragging my feet, I had already finished the paperwork. The transfer to the Veterans Memorial Trust was signed, notarized, and filed. Irrevocable. Their scheme was dead in the ground, right beside Margaret. And come Friday, when they marched into the cemetery with their buyer and their folder full of dreams, they would finally learn what happens when you mistake love for weakness. Friday came gray and heavy, the kind of morning Margaret used to call cemetery weather. The oak tree above her grave rattled in the wind, scattering brown leaves across the grass like confetti from some forgotten celebration. I arrived early, as always. I brushed the leaves off her headstone, traced her name with my fingers, and whispered, "Stay still, Maggie. They'll try to move you today, but this ground is stronger than their greed." By the time Laura's SUV crunched up the gravel path, I was standing beside her grave with my cane planted firmly in the soil. Alex climbed out first, wearing a collared shirt like he was attending a job interview. Laura followed with the folder clutched to her chest. Behind them trailed a man in a sleek suit, the buyer, his leather shoes shining obscenely in the dirt. "Dad," Laura called, her voice falsely warm, "we brought Mr. Hansen from the funeral trust. He's very interested." Mr. Hansen extended his hand. "Pleasure, Mr. Carter. I understand you've agreed to sell 2 adjoining plots." I didn't take his hand. I simply looked at Laura. "You told him that?" Her smile flickered, but she pressed on. "Yes. And once you sign today, the payment clears in a week. Think of all the things you could finally do with the money." Alex smirked. "Told you it'd be easy, Grandpa." The wind gusted, scattering more leaves over Margaret's grave. One landed on the buyer's polished shoe, and he shook it off impatiently, like the earth itself offended him. I let the silence stretch, then turned to the cemetery manager, who had been waiting quietly by the gate. Old Roberts, a man I'd served beside on the board for years, nodded once at me before stepping forward with a thick folder of his own. "Mr. Hansen," Roberts said crisply, "I'm afraid there's been a mistake. These plots are no longer available." Laura blinked. "What? That's impossible. My father." "Your father," Roberts interrupted, "transferred them 3 days ago. They now belong to the Veterans Memorial Trust. Legally and irrevocably." The color drained from Laura's face. Alex's jaw dropped. Mr. Hansen frowned, clearly annoyed. "What do you mean irrevocably?" Laura stammered. "We had papers, he said he'd think about it, he promised." I finally spoke, my voice steady as stone. "I promised Margaret. Not you. She stays here. I stay here. No one uproots us." Alex stepped forward, red-faced. "This isn't fair. You tricked us." I turned my gaze on him, sharp as a chisel. "Fair? You wanted to sell your grandmother's grave like it was scrap metal. You wanted to dig her up, Alex. Do you even hear yourself?" The boy faltered, but Laura jumped in, desperation breaking her voice. "Dad, we just wanted to help. You don't understand, money could have made things easier for all of us." I gestured to Margaret Stone, the oak tree, the earth beneath us. "This is not a thing to make easier. This is love. This is memory. This is sacred. And you tried to turn it into cash." A flock of crows rose suddenly from the trees, their wings cutting across the gray sky. The sound was harsh, metallic, final. Laura covered her face with her hands. Alex kicked at the gravel like a sulking child. Mr. Hansen muttered something about wasted time and stormed back to his car. Roberts closed his folder with a snap. "This matter is settled. The trust owns the plots. Permanently." I rested my hand on Margaret's headstone. The cold granite steadied me, gave me strength. And then I looked at my daughter, the same child whose hand I once held on the way to her first day of school. "You've lost more than money today, Laura. You've lost me. From now on, don't come back here. You're not welcome at this ground, or in my home. The silence that followed was deeper than grief. It was burial. They had tried to sell our graves. Instead, I buried what little family I had left. When their car finally disappeared down the gravel road, the cemetery was quiet again. The only sound was the rustle of the oak leaves above us, the same tree Margaret had chosen all those years ago. I lowered myself onto the bench across from her stone. My knees ached, my chest still throbbed from the weight of the confrontation, but for the first time in months, I felt lighter. They won't touch you, Maggie, I whispered. Not ever. I made sure of it. The sun broke through the clouds just then, laying a strip of light across the grass, warming the granite of her headstone. I closed my eyes, imagining her hand slipping into mine the way it used to when words weren't necessary. For so long I'd carried grief like a stone in my chest. But that day, in the silence after their betrayal, I realized something: grief isn't just sorrow. It's also duty. A duty to protect, to remember, to honor. And I had kept it.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.